The silence out here is a physical thing. It presses in on you, fills your ears until you can hear the thrum of your own blood. When she was alive, it was a comfort, our shared quiet. Now, it just feels like dead weight. The cabin was our dream, a little box of cedar and glass tucked away in a fold of the mountains, miles from the nearest town. It's 100 acres of wood, our own little kingdom, complete with a small gated patch of land dotted with mossy headstones that's been in my family for about 200 years. A quiet place for a quiet end. We never thought we'd be using it so soon. I buried her a week ago. The memory is a blur of black suits, the artificial green of the funeral home carpet, and the first shovel full of dark, wet earth. It felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. The world had tilted on its axis, and I was just trying not to slide off. I've spent the last 7 days in a fog, moving from the bed to the couch, and back again. The pictures on the wall are a torment. Her smile, the light in her eyes, it's like looking at a ghost. The ghost of a life that was stolen from me. Grief is a strange beast. It's not just sadness, it's exhaustion. A deep bone-wearing fatigue that makes the simplest tasks feel like climbing a mountain. Eating is a chore. Sleeping is a battle against the replays in my mind. The screech of tires, the glint of shattered glass, the wail of a single useless siren. It was on the 8th night that I heard it. Sleep had been a shallow, restless thing, but I'd finally sunk into the dreamless black. The sound pulled me out of it slowly, a persistent, rhythmic scraping. Scrape, thump, scrape, thump. My first thought was a bear, or maybe a deer, pawing at the earth. The family plot is only 100 yards or so from the cabin, up a small rise just within the tree line. I rolled over, pulling the pillow over my head. The sound was muffled but still there. A patient, industrious noise that grated on my already frayed nerves. I told myself it was nothing, an animal driven by some instinct I couldn't comprehend. The woods are full of sounds at night, a language you can only learn when you're forced to listen. I had been hearing them all my life. This was no different. Eventually the sound faded, or maybe I just fell back asleep. Either way, the sun was streaming through the window when I woke up, the night's disturbance feeling distant and unreal. The next morning I knew I had to go. I'd been avoiding it, avoiding her. It felt like a betrayal to stand there on the surface, while she was down there. But the thought of some animal desecrating the grave was worse. I pulled on my boots, my hands shaking as I tied the laces. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth. The path to the cemetery was worn and familiar, a trail I'd walked 1,000 times since I was a boy. The small wrought iron gate groaned as I pushed it open, and there it was, her grave. The mound of earth was still fresh, darker than the surrounding soil, not yet reclaimed by grass and weeds. Not in a violent, dug-up way. It was more subtle than that. The soil seemed churned, loosened, as if something had been scrabbling at the surface, pushing the dirt around. A few of the flower arrangements I had left were knocked over, petals scattered like colorful tears. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned the perimeter looking for tracks. I found a few impressions in the soft earth, but they were indistinct, scuffed. Could have been a coyote, could have been anything. I knelt, and my fingers tracing the edge of the disturbed patch. The explanation came to me in a wave of desperate relief. The ground was settling, of course. That's what happens. The soil is loose, it rains, it shifts. That's all it was. The scraping I heard was probably just a branch rubbing against the cabin in the wind. My grieving mind was playing tricks on me, turning shadows into monsters. I spent the next hour tidying up, righting the flowers, smoothing the soil with my hands. It felt like a duty, a way to protect her, even now. Talking to her as I worked, a voice a low murmur in the quiet woods. I told her I missed her. I told her I was sorry. I told her I didn't know how to do this without her. The silence was my only answer. I went back to the cabin feeling a little lighter, the weight of my anxiety eased by a plausible, rational explanation. I made myself a proper meal for the first time in days. I even read a few pages of a book, the words a welcome distraction. As darkness fell, I felt the semblance of peace settle over me. I was going to be okay. It would take time, but I would survive. That night, sleep came easier. I dreamt of her, not the accident, but the good times. Her laughter as we danced in the kitchen, the warmth of her hand in mine. It was a kind dream, a gentle dream. And then I was awake, pulled from the depths by a sound that cut through the night, sharp and clear. I bolted upright in bed, my heart instantly pounding. The clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. My first thought was that I dreamt it. A sound from the dream bleeding into the real world. I held my breath, listening. The silence of the cabin pressed in again, thick and absolute. I was about to lie back down, to dismiss it, when it came again. Softer this time, more hesitant, but undeniably real. It was coming from the front door. A cold dread washed over me. No one's come out here, not at this time of night. My nearest neighbor is a mile down the dirt road. My mind raced through the possibilities. A lost hiker? Someone whose car had broken down? But who would walk a mile through the woods in the dead of night instead of using their phone? I slid out of bed, my feet cold on the wooden floor. I crept into the living room, my eyes straining in the gloom. The moonlight filtering through the large picture window illuminated the front door, a solid slab of oak between me and whatever was outside. I didn't have a gun. We never felt the need for one out here. My hand closed around the heavy iron fire poker next to the hearth. It wasn't much, but it was something. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Who's there? I called out, my voice raspy, unfamiliar to my own ears. There was no one, only the whisper of the winds through the pines. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the fire poker held tight in my sweaty grip. Maybe they'd left. Maybe it was just my imagination after all. Then a third time, softer still, barely a tap. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't demanding. It was patient. I had to know. The not knowing was a terror of its own. I moved to the door, my bare feet silent on the floorboards. I took a deep breath, my knuckles white on the cold metal of the doorknob, and pulled the door open. And the world stopped. She was standing there, on the porch, bathed in the pale, ethereal glow of the moon. It was her. Her face, her hair, her eyes. She was wearing the simple white dress we'd buried her in. It was smudged with dirt, the hem caked with dark, damp earth. Her feet were bare, also stained with soil. But she was whole. There were no marks, no injuries. The impossible, horrific damage from the accident was gone. She was just her. Perfect, beautiful, standing on my porch in the middle of the night. My mind shattered into a million pieces. The fire poker slipped from my grasp and clattered onto the floor. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. It was a dream, a hallucination, the product of a mind broken by grief. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the image to disappear. But then I opened them. She was still there. And she was silent. She just looked at me. Her expression was calm, placid. There was no recognition in her eyes. No confusion, no joy, no fear. Nothing. It was like looking at a beautiful lifelike statue, an empty vessel. Hello? The word was a choked whisper. She didn't respond. She didn't blink. She just stood there waiting. I don't know what came over me. Every rational part of my brain was screaming, a high-pitched wail of pure terror. This is not real. This is not her. Close the door. Run. But the part of me that was still drowning in grief, The part that would have sold my soul to have her back for one more second. That part won. My hand, trembling, reached out. I expected it to pass through her, like smoke, but my fingers touched her arm. Her skin was cool, but it was solid. Real. A sob escaped my lips. A raw, ragged sound. It was her. A miracle. An impossible, terrifying miracle. I stepped aside, holding the door open, and without a word, she glided past me into the cabin. I closed the door, my back pressed against it, my legs feeling like they were about to give out. She stood in the middle of the living room, her hands at her sides, her bare feet leaving faint, earthy smudges on the wooden floor. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. She just stood there waiting for something. Possibly direction, maybe. "Sit," I whispered, pointing to the armchair, her favorite one. She turned her head, her movements fluid but lacking any natural spontaneity. She walked to the chair and sat down. Her posture was perfect, her hands resting in her lap. She looked like a photograph, a perfect three-dimensional photograph of my wife. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, watching her. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Disbelief warred with a desperate, burgeoning hope. Fear wrestled with a love so profound it hurt to breathe. Was it really her? Had some higher power answered my desperate, unspoken prayers? Or was I completely, irrevocably insane? I tried talking to her. I knelt in front of her chair, holding her cool, unresponsive hands. I told her about my week. I asked her questions. Where had she been? How was she here? Did she remember me? Did she love me? She offered nothing in return. Her eyes, those beautiful eyes that used to dance with so much life and laughter, were fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. They were just optics now, reflecting the dim light of the room. There was no soul behind them. The sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The morning light streamed into the cabin, falling across her face, and in the unforgiving light of day, the illusion began to crack. She was beautiful, yes, perfect even, but it was the perfection of a doll, flawless and utterly lifeless. The next few days passed in a surreal, agonizing haze. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, a psychological prison of my own making. The thing that looked like my wife was a ghost that cast a solid shadow. It, or she, existed in a state of absolute passivity. She wouldn't move unless I told her to. In the morning I would say, "Stand up," and she would stand. "Come to the kitchen," and she would follow, her footsteps silent. I'd pull out a chair for her at the table, and she would wait, motionless, until I said, "Sit down." Eating was the worst. I'd place a plate of food in front of her, and she would simply stare at it. The first time I waited for an hour, my own food growing cold, my stomach churning. Nothing. Finally, in a moment of desperate, surreal experimentation, I picked up her fork, wrapped her fingers around it, and physically guided it to the food and then to her mouth. She chewed, slowly and mechanically. She swallowed, and then she waited for the next bite. I had to do everything. I led her to the bathroom. I turned on the shower. She would stand under the water, hair plastering to her face, her eyes opened and unfocused, until I turned it off. I'd dress her in her own clothes, her limbs moving with a pliant, cooperative emptiness that was more horrifying than any resistance would have been. She was a living, breathing doll. My wife's body, her face, her scent, all of it was there. But she, the person I loved, the soul that had inhabited this beautiful shell, was gone. And in her place was nothing. I would talk to her for hours, my voice filling the oppressive silence of the cabin. I'd read to her from her favorite books. I'd play her favorite music. I'd tell her stories about our life together, my words choked with tears, hoping, praying for a flicker of recognition, a smile, a frown, anything. There was never anything. Just the same placid, empty calm. At night, she would lie in our bed, perfectly still. her breathing even and shallow. I slept on the couch. I couldn't bear to be next to that thing. To feel the warmth of a body that no longer housed the person I loved. To lie beside the perfect, hollow replica of my greatest love was a torment beyond words. I was more alone with her in the house than I had been when I was truly alone. The fear I'd felt on the first night had curled into a constant, grinding psychological agony. It was a curse, a cruel cosmic joke. I had my wife back, but I had lost her all over again, in a way that was more infinitely painful. It was about a week after her return that I saw it. I was standing at the kitchen window, washing dishes, my movements automatic, and my mind a million miles away. She was sitting at the table behind me, a silent, beautiful statue. My eyes drifted to the woods, to the path that led toward the town. And then I saw movement. It was far away, near the edge of my property where the woods thickened. At first I thought it was a deer, but it was the wrong color. A pale bone white. It moved wrong. I squinted, my heart starting to beat a little faster. It was long-limbed, impossibly so, and it was crawling on all fours, its movements unnervingly fluid, like a spider made of smoke. It moved with a strange, loping grace that was utterly unnatural. It was coming from the direction of the town, from the direction of the town cemetery a mile away. As I watched, paralyzed, it paused. It raised its head, even from the distance. I felt a wave of cold, primal dread wash over me. I couldn't make out any features, just a smooth, pale oval. It seemed to survey the area for a moment, before lowering its head and continuing its silent, crawling journey, disappearing into the dense woods that separated my land from the road to town. I stood frozen at the window, the water running over my numb hands. The image of that pale, crawling thing was burned into my mind. A thought, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my grief and despair. The digging, the disturbed soil, her return, the creature, the pieces were all there, forming a picture of such impossible horror that my mind recoiled from it. That was the moment I knew I had to leave. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live with this constant, silent reminder of what I've lost. I couldn't destroy it. How could I? It wore her face. It was her body. The thought of harming it made me physically ill, but I couldn't stay. To stay would mean to lose my mind completely. I started packing a bag, my movements frantic, clumsy. I threw clothes, a few books, anything I could grab into a duffel bag. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to go. She watched me, her head turning to follow my movements, her expression unchanging. "I'm leaving," I said to her, my voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." She did not react. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and slung the bag over my shoulder. I didn't look at her as I walked out the door. I couldn't. I closed it behind me, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet morning air. I left her sitting at the kitchen table. The thought was a knife in my gut. I practically ran to my car, throwing the bag in the back seat. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine turned over with a roar that felt like a violation of the deep country silence. I put the car in reverse, my tires crunching on the gravel driveway. I just needed to get to the main road, to civilization, to a world where the dead stayed dead. As I reached the end of the long driveway, where it met the narrow dirt road, I saw someone running towards me. It was my neighbor, the closest one, a man who lived about a mile down the road. He was a good man, a widower himself. He was waving his arms, a huge ecstatic grin on his face. I slowed the car, rolling down the window, a sense of unease prickling in my skin. "It's a miracle," he cried, his voice choked with joyful sobs. He was weeping, tears streaming down his weathered face. "A miracle gift from God." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice flat, dead. "My son," he beamed, pointing back toward his house. "My boy, he came home. He just walked right out of the woods not an hour ago. He was buried 2 years ago, but he's home. He's really home. My blood ran cold. I couldn't speak. My gaze drifted past him, past his weeping, joyous form to the road behind him, and I saw them. Emerging from the trees, from the shadows of the forest that lined the road, were other figures. A woman in a faded housecoat, her hair matted. A young boy in a Little League uniform. An old man leaning on a cane that he no longer seemed to need. They moved with the same fluid, silent purpose. Their faces were all the same, calm, placid, and empty. They were walking towards the town. They were going home. I looked from their blank faces to my neighbor's tear-streaked, ecstatic one. He hadn't noticed their emptiness yet. He was still lost in the joy of his answered prayer. A walking, silent plague of answered prayers. My final act was to get in the car and drive away. I pushed the accelerator to the floor, the car lurching forward, kicking up dust, but I didn't get far. Around the first bend, the road became crowded. They were everywhere. Dozens of them. They were everywhere. Dozens of them, all walking with the same silent, placid gait, all heading home. My car was forced to a crawl, trapped in a slow, silent parade of the town's resurrected dead. They parted around the vehicle without looking at me, their eyes fixed on a destination only they could see. I was just a temporary obstruction in their dutiful, silent pilgrimage, trapped in a river of hollow miracles, with the horrifying knowledge of the pale, crawling thing that had granted all these terrible, beautiful wishes.